In the age of social media, we often look to people that we admire to keep us informed about the things that matter. But sometimes that influence isn't used for good, and misinformation circulates faster than the truth. In the last year, the conflict with Israel and Palestine have left people globally divided. But my guest today, Noa Tishby, is using her platform to share truth about the conflict and dismantle anti-Semitism once and for all. You're listening to We Need to Talk.
So you got something to say that is on your mind. We need to talk about it. You know, just one conversation can change your life. We need to talk about it. We need to talk.
Thank you so much, Noa, for being on We Need to Talk today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do. I mean, I do. It's kind of, the world is so crazy at this point in time.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm not speaking for myself only, but the Jewish community feels so under attack in so many different ways that it's just like every other community that reaches out to have a conversation is so appreciated. Like, I can't even tell you. So.
Oh, well, I'm glad to help amplify awareness, because it is definitely something that is needed specifically. Yes, we need to talk about it. And that's what the whole show is.
Exactly.
I've been following you for a while now, and I really do appreciate your intentional and factual information.
Thank you.
In regards to Israel, obviously more specifically the Israel-Palestine conflict, because, you know, we live in a day and age where everybody that has a social media platform is a news source, whether it's opinion or fact, right? And you really use your platform in a way that's forthcoming about facts, but you also have the ability to keep emotion out of it. You're very, very factual. So I really do appreciate that, because I think sometimes, you know, emotion does tend to get in the way of truth, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on. So for you, in using your platform and having these difficult conversations and presenting this information, how have you been able to effectively explain to people that what is happening that may not have sort of a comprehensive, non-biased overview?
Sure. So first of all, how was I effectively able to make a change? I think that I always joke that I do my work, I do what I do with a cunning use of facts, right? So I was born and raised in Israel, and I moved to the States in my early teens, 20s, sorry. And I was shocked to see the misunderstanding and misinformation and how little people know about Israel. And this was pre-social media, the way we know it today. But what I saw was something shocking, because I saw people had no idea about Israel, nothing at all, but they had very strong opinions. And that was literally in my book proposal, that I wrote a book about it, and we'll talk about this in a second. This was what I wrote. I'm like, I was blown away by the discrepancy between how little people knew about the country and how with such conviction, this is the truth about Israel. And I was standing there going, no, it really is not, like, not at all. So it became my life mission to explain to people that Israel is not what they think that it is, and to literally prevent a second disaster coming upon the Jews yet again. And I think that if people take the time, for example, read my book, right? So my book is called Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth, right? And I saw it was what was missing in the market was a book that tells the story of Israel in a way that's easy to understand. And it's simple and it's fun. And God forbid, it's even funny sometimes. And it's very personal, right? Like, it tells the story of the country through the story of my family that helped establish the country. And I know that anybody that takes the time to read and to educate themselves past like 140 or whatever number Twitter allows us to communicate at right now, they do get the picture. And I had a lot of people come to me and go, wow, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. And so I do feel like it's one person at a time. But again, as humanity, our attention span is short. our ability or desire to focus is short. Our amygdala is triggered every single day by sensationalism and lies, because that's how the algorithm likes it. So we're all trapped in this loop of, horrible, like, fake news and hate and rage. And everybody has their own version of that. And what I'm here to point out is that this rage that is now targeting Israel and the Jewish people is as old as the Jewish people. And it's just coming up now in the form of this new online hate and lies and misinformation that I would hope to debunk with you and have your listeners get a bit more of an understanding of what's actually happening right now.
It's interesting, though, because in my awareness of the negative perceptions of the Jewish community and how, I guess, prevalent, that anti-Semitism is now.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know where these perceptions of the Jewish community came from. And I would love to know if you, in your conversations with people, if you have been able to kind of get back to an origin for people. Wow. Because in the questions that I've asked, I feel like no one's been able to give me an answer.
Oh my God, this is great. I love this question. So first of all, let's figure out let's talk about what is anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism in its most simple form is anti-Jewish racism. Okay? It's anti-Jewish racism. So you're racist against the Jews. However, here's the tricky part about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is both looking down at someone and also looking up at someone. So it's like the anti-Semitism is versus other forms of hate, attributes to the Jews both the most loathsome and horrible traits and also the most powerful and the most like cunning and the most whatever. Both these sides exist in the Jew, right? Now, anti-Semitism, so anti-Jewish racism, has been around for thousands of years in various forms. So I am obsessed with history, and there's a particular historian that I love. His name was Josephus Flavius. He lived in the old land of Israel, in Judea, in at the turn of the millennium, like in 70 AD. Basically, he wrote this book. He was a witness to the great Jewish-Roman War, in which the Jews were the Jerusalem was destroyed and the Jews was dispersed in the diaspora, and he wrote all these books about it. And this is how we know what had happened at the time, like from a historical perspective. When he came to Rome after the destruction of Israel, in 70 AD, he wrote a book called The Antiquity of the Jews. And he wrote that book. It was an epic, like 10-volume book, right? And he wrote that book in order to fight pagan anti-Semitism in Rome. Okay, that was 2,000 years ago. This historian decided to write a book because he felt like Jews were marginalized in Rome in 74 AD.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how old that is. Now, what happened with anti-Semitism throughout the 2,000 years that have brought us to today is that it keeps transforming. So it's a shape-shifting hate. Okay, so what happens is in every generation, the Jew, and this is something that I've taken, it's a concept that I've taken from an author named Yossi Klein Halevi, who's an amazing guy. And I called him up and I'm like, I love this concept. I'm going to run with it. So he identified that throughout history, the Jew, in quotation, right, was used in order to describe whatever it is that's most loathsome in society at the moment. Okay, so throughout, in the early days of Christianity, the Jew was the Christ killer, right? When there were plagues, the Black Plague, the Jews were the ones that spread the plague. That was the blood libel at the time. In the days of communism, the Jews were the capitalist pigs, okay? Or the communists, depends on where, right? Nazism, the Jew was the race polluter. Okay, so in every era in time throughout history, the Jew is representing what's worst in society at that particular moment, the worst thing ever. Now, I mean,
it depends on who you're asking.
Right, in polite societies, in the societies that we kind of like, what's the, in like, of course, and yeah, you're right.
Because on one hand, you would say the worst thing to be in society, quote unquote, is to be a member of a marginalized group.
Well, no, that's of course. But I'm not talking that. Of course, that is true. But like in terms of like the perception,
a racist,
a colonialist, and like be involved in apartheid, right?
Yeah.
Now notice this, lo and behold, you people, lo and behold, who's accused of representing all these traits? The Jewish state. And I'm telling you, and I know this is a confronting concept for your listeners. I mean, it may be a confronting concept for your listeners. These things are just not true, but they're being plastered onto Israel as a representation of, like, quote unquote, the Jew in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we all walk around with subconscious biases, right?
For sure.
We all learn about this. We keep learning about this, keep growing and learning. So we all have subconscious biases about Jews. Okay. The Jews have all the power. The Jews have all the the Jews are whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we walk around with these unidentified subconscious biases against Jews, that affects our opinion about Israel, whether we like it or not. So when you have a subconscious bias about a Jew, right? And it's not even, I don't hate Jews. They're fine. They just have all the, right? Right? Yeah, the Jews are
Right.
whatever. And then you hear, yeah, Israel's an ethnic cleansing state. Subconsciously you go, yeah, that makes sense. Sure. And that's as an Israeli and an American Jewish, a proud American Jewish woman, it's not just infuriating, it's damn straight scary.
Yeah.
Because let's debunk those like things one by one, right? Ethnic cleansing. We read about like Mark Ruffalo, right? Tweets like Israel's an ethnic cleansing state. And you're like, oh my God. And you see this everywhere on social media, unlike with quote unquote activists, right? So like that's the ethnic cleansing, for example, like at the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948, there were 150,000 Arab Israeli Palestinians in the state. Now there are nearly 2 million and they're 21.1% of the population. How is that ethnic cleansing? You see what I mean? Like it's just factually not true. And when it's factually not true, but it's repeated on social media by people that we all love, you kind of say to yourself, well, maybe that's true. And I'm saying, no, that's anti-Semitism hidden in a different variation of 2020.
One of the first things I'm sure that you'll agree with is that as you're talking, there's so many parallels to the Jewish struggle to the Black community as well.
Absolutely. That's why we were always allies.
Yes.
And now,
absolutely.
We've been divided.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. And the Jewish community is sitting there being so frustrated, going, we felt like a kindred spirit with the Black community. We were always there. And we walked, like Rabbi Herschel, walked on Selma next to,
Yeah. And even when I was doing research during Black History Month, I always share facts on my social media. One of the things that I didn't know that I found out was that HBCUs were one of the places that Jewish people that fled from Nazi Germany were able to find, peace and were welcomed in, and they ended up staying there, being scholars there, teaching. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so beautiful. Like, why do we not still have that unity?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating for me because when I see those parallels within marginalized groups, I'm like, why are we not getting together, and why are we not stronger allies for one another so that we can take down all of this racism that is plaguing us in this country? And it's really, really frustrating for me to see that. But the other thing is that I've noticed is that a lot of people in regards to the Black community as well, they have a lot of ignorance in regards to oppression and the roots of our history and how it's not relevant anymore, right? So I'm sure for you and your community, people say, well, God, anymore. The Holocaust. Yeah, the Holocaust was a long time ago. You guys are fine. Jewish people are at the top, or slavery was like thousands of years ago, which it literally was not, but you know what I mean? So how do you shut down that kind of commentary that presents Jewish oppression as being a thing of the past when anti-Semitism is so very clearly on the rise? Because in my conversations about Black oppression, I'm like, first of all, slavery was not 1,000 years ago. I don't know why you think that, right? One, my dad was born in 1944 in Mississippi. You have no idea what that man went through, right? And he's still alive today, right? So it's really shocking to me how far removed people are from history when it really wasn't that long ago. So I'm just curious how you sort of combat those sort of comments, because I'm sure you get them all the time.
All the time. So first of all, yeah, slavery was 1,000 years ago, and there are 100 million Jews in the world too.
Right.
Right?
That's the other thing. The percentage of Jewish people don't realize how minimal it is.
15 million Jews all over the world.
Yeah.
Not in America, all over the world. There are 15 million Jews. Anti-Semitism, so anti-Jewish racism, is the oldest form of discrimination, which is still practiced today and has been practiced for thousands of years, right? So, and to speak on that, we all know what generational trauma is. We all understand what epigenetic trauma carried down means. My stepmom is a second generation to Holocaust survivor, right? She was born in Bergen-Belsen in Germany in a camp, and she until this day packs food underneath the bed. Basically packs food all around the house and inserted in the family this fear of like, there are stories of like of second generations and third generation that sleeps with their shoes on. Like there is fear that goes down through generations. And to come to 2022 and to present the Jews as white passing, white privilege, and to relate to the Jews as if the Jewish people have been awarded the same privileges that white Christians have throughout history it's just false. It's false, and it's washing away history, thousands of years of history of oppression, discrimination, persecution, like hatred. Basically every place the Jews went to, they try to kill them. It's that whole joke about the Jewish calendar. They try to kill us. It didn't work. Let's eat.
I haven't heard that. Oh my gosh.
Every single Jewish holidays, they try to, that's the essence of, that's the essence of being a Jew around the world. And what's happening today is that anti-Semitic attacks are on the rise. It's the highest that it's been in like 40 years, right? You have hatred online is unbelievable. We call it surfing the web while Jewish. Right? I mean, I post Shabbat Shalom and I get hate online all the time, right? And yet marginalized communities are telling us now, no, you don't belong. You don't belong. You're white, you're privileged. And we're like, what? What just happened?
And here's the thing, though. I think that you'll agree with this. There clearly are white passing Jewish people, right?
Sure, of course.
But that if you're only focusing on that aspect of the Jewish community, you're completely erasing all of the people that, you know what I'm saying? There are dark-skinned Jews.
My Moroccan Jewish friends get very upset about this. Very upset.
So if you're only focusing on that aspect of it, then you're really not listening, one, which is the main thing that people need to do. And it's really frustrating because you're erasing an entire group within a group those issues are still affecting them. So I think that acknowledging that, yes, there are some white passing Jews that probably, if you went outside, you would not know they were Jewish. And I even talked about this with Jonah Platt. I don't know if you know who Jonah Platt was.
I do, and I listened to the...
we talked about this. And to me, that's actually more terrifying, being a white passing Jewish person, not knowing that you could be around somebody that just has complete hate for Jewish people and then having to hide your identity in that sense.
100%. And 65% of Jewish college kids say that American Jewish college kids, they fear for their safety. 50% of them hide their Jewish identity. So we went back in 2022, being Jewish on campus is like being gay in like the 60s. You can't be out. You have to hide it. You have to hide it. And that is something that really needs to land for anybody that's listening right now.
Yeah.
Right. Here's the other thing about this, like painting everything by color, right? And trying to look at history and putting it into this intersectionality kind of brackets, right? As it relates to Israel. And again, I want your listeners to really listen carefully to this, right? Israel is not a white country.
Yeah.
I hate having these conversations. It annoys me because it's a racist conversation to begin with, but like, screw that. You have to, because you have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to talk about it.
Exactly. So in 2022, right, only 31% of Israeli citizens define themselves as of Eastern European descent. So the rest is either North African Jews or Arab Israelis or whatever. It's like of the quote unquote indigenous to the area, although all Jews are indigenous to Judea. And again, arguing with that is also weird. But, you know, Jews are originated from the Levant. When we came to Europe, they're like, you don't belong here because you're from the Levant. Now we're here. They're like, you don't belong here because you're from, I mean, what the heck? It doesn't matter where we go. It's like, you don't belong here. But now we're in Israel. They tell us you don't belong here too. What are you talking about? So only 31% of Israelis actually define themselves as of Eastern European descent. All you need to do to know that Israel is not a white country is to go to Israel and walk down the street. It's very apparent. However, social justice groups here are trying to use intersectionality as a weapon against Israel when the premise is wrong to begin with. So they'll come to Black Lives Matter and the Women's March and all these incredible social justice movements, and they'll sell them on an anti-Israel agenda using a false premise of intersectionality and white on brown oppression. It's, again, for the Jewish community, we're sitting and watching this like hate that's coming out of Black Lives Matter when we always align ourselves with the Black community. And it's very scary and it's very sad. And it really needs to end.
And it goes back to an earlier point that you made in regards to celebrities using their platforms, because I mean, just being honest, I feel like in general, people are lazy in terms of reading and doing research, right? Yep. We're a headline society. That's just who we are. And we follow people because we trust them. And, you know, the same way people look at our politicians, they look at your pastors, you look at rabbis, whatever. You look at your public figures for the truth, and you just trust that what they're telling you is correct. And so when you get into those types of movements, there is a responsibility for celebrities and for public figures to present the facts, but that unfortunately is not what consistently happens. Now, I know for you, when you're speaking about Israel and Palestine, you have spoken directly to Bella Hadid, who I know has been one celebrity who has consistently shared information without context and without really starting a safe conversation for people. So how have you reached out to any celebrities that you have seen giving misleading information to their followers and try to have a conversation with them so that they are using their platform for truth and safe conversations as opposed to continuing to perpetuate anti-Israel rhetoric?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to point out to what you just said, anti-Israel rhetoric. I really want your listeners to get that like 9 out of 10 times it's anti-Israel rhetoric and nothing more than that, which is it's anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish racism hidden as social justice, which is just virtue signaling and nothing else. And like buying into like to nefarious voices propaganda. So a lot to unpack there. So I'm about to actually record another video because Muhammad Hadid, Bella and Gigi's father, actually called me a liar on Friday. So I think by the time this podcast comes out, the video is already going to be out there. So you guys can go to my Instagram and social media and watch it. That particular family is so dangerous with what they spew that I don't even know where to begin. And it's like our society right now is taking advice on the Middle East conflict from a supermodel, from an LA-based supermodel who is ill-equipped to give any of this advice. Now, her father is Palestinian and was born in Israel, by the way, not in Palestine. We'll talk about that in a second as well, in 1948. So she has this street cred of being, authentically from the region. But it's so false. And let me give you an example, right? So she posted on her stories one time about the Palestine soccer team and the Palestine orchestra. And she said, see, there was a Palestine. We had a state. How great. We had, see, the people who say that there wasn't, right? The Palestine orchestra was created after World War II by Holocaust survivors, by Jewish Holocaust survivors who started an orchestra, who ran away from the Nazis and started an orchestra. And now Bella Hadid is using those Holocaust survivors to make a point that doesn't exist. I mean, it's just shocking, right?
Yeah.
And here's the other thing to understand. And again, I'm going to say something that is, it may be confronting for people, but it's the truth. And I go into it in my book in length, right? There has never been a Palestine as a state. Palestine was in reference to a geographical location stretched from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to Iraq and Syria up north, east and north, which was given to the region by the Romans after the Great Jewish-Roman War in order to disconnect the connection between the Jews and Judea. This is not like, this is just a historical fact. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a Palestine, but there just hasn't been yet, right? So before the establishment of Israel, it was the Arabs of Palestine, the Jews of Palestine, the Christians of Palestine. It was a geographical location. And now we have Bella Hadid, who is crying to free Palestine from the river to the sea, which is effectively calling on ethnic cleansing of the Jews from their ancestor land. And she looks great while she do it. She looks so hot. So everybody is like, hey,
you're like, and that makes me even more upset.
No, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, our historians are on cover of Vogue and they go to the Met Gala. And it's like what people are listening to now. And it's just really, and again, it's so frustrating because when you take that thread and you pull it all the way back thousands of years ago, you see that it's all the same. Yeah. People just want to believe the worst.
And what's also interesting is that, and this is in my own research and conversations that I've had, is when you take away whatever people's views and perceptions are of the Israel-Palestine conflict, I was actually surprised to find out, and it's not that I thought it was, this dictatorship of a country, but I was actually surprised to find out how progressive Israel is in, respect to the rest of the Middle East. Of course.
And also in respect to America in many ways.
Right. I mean, just in conversations with one of my very good friends, just how they were with LGBTQ rights and being able to practice whatever religion you believe in and things like that. And I don't think that a lot of the social justice groups and progressive people in this country, and I'm very much involved in social justice and being a progressive, but I'm also wanting to know the facts and be educated so that I'm not misusing my platform. But I think that a lot of the people in those spaces haven't taken the time to realize that and do that research. And that's upsetting because I do think once you dive in and start reading, there will be a lot of epiphanies for people about how Israel functions as a whole. But for you, could you explain just a little bit about how the Israeli government works for people that are unaware and maybe do have a negative perception of how their government is run?
Sure. So first, again, thank you so much for saying that, right? So for example, right, Israel never had a don't ask, don't tell policy. So you could be gay in the military. It was like a non-issue, right? But when this is brought up to social justice warriors in the United States, they go, it's pinkwashing. I'm like, it's not pinkwashing. You're lying about Israel and then you're using, it's just like, it's kind of like a vortex that you can get out of. So I can curse on TV in Israel. It's a very open society. Most politicians have a nickname. Like it's Bibi and Bougie and it's like a Tzipi and it's a nickname, and it's not like disrespectful. It's a very casual society. It's a very open society. It's a way more progressive society than it is in a lot of different ways, even to America, definitely to the Middle East, right? I mean, legit in the Middle East, like you can make out, the gays have, I don't even know where to start with this, right? With LGBTQ rights in Israel, right? Because it's like gays, they're gays in the military and in government and in every, and the government pays for like surrogacy for gays couple. Like it's just, anyway. The way the Israeli government works is it's a parliamentary system. So there are 120 seats in the Knesset, which is the parliament, the Israeli parliament, and every party that wins the majority kind of gets to create the government. There was Bibi Netanyahu, who was the Israeli prime minister for like 12 years. He kept winning and winning and winning elections. The last few couple of years, he was unable to form coalition, basically, and there were 5 consecutive elections. But at the end of them, Yair Lapid, who won the majority on the other side, got the mandate, and together with Naftali Bennett, they created a coalition. That particular coalition is how democracy should work. Okay, so the coalition right now, the government in Israel right now, is comprised of right-wing parties, left-wing parties, Arab parties, and in fact, again, to all those people that are calling Israel an apartheid state, which is again an insult to South African apartheid, right? And all the anti-apartheid activists. An Arab party was the one that actually decided if a government will be formed or not. Okay. So apartheid, Israeli Arabs have exactly the same rights as Jews. So you can't call Israel an apartheid state. There are 2 Supreme Court judges who are Arab Israelis in Israel. 28.1% of nurses and doctors in Israeli hospitals are Arabs. Like they have the same right as Jews. So to call Israel an apartheid state is ridiculous. Again, it's blood libel. It's anti-Semitic, right? To say that, because it's just factually not true. And that's how the government works right now. And there are people that they disagree on various things politically, but they make the country work. So when you look at Israel right now, this is what democracy looks like, the Israeli government right now. They decided that if you don't agree on
I love this history lesson. Yeah, I love it. Well, I just love learning, but you don't know what you don't know. But if you don't listen, then you're never going to know it, right? So I do appreciate you sharing all of this. Now, within Israel, you actually have a new role. This is the first time that someone's been appointed. So I want you to say exactly what your title is and what you're going to be doing with the Israeli government.
Yes. So I have. So I don't know if your listeners know, but there's the American government, the Canadian government, the EU, Germany, Australia. They have a position called Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism. And Deborah Lipstadt was just nominated. She just got confirmed as the United States Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism. She's a brilliant scholar, Holocaust scholar. She's incredible. And the state of Israel just appointed me to be Israel's first ever Special Envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization. It's wonderful. Extremely exciting. It's overwhelming. And I hope to continue doing what I'm doing, which is raise awareness for anti-Semitism and its new forms today, and make people kind of stop and think and look at their subconscious biases and how it's affecting their positions and their opinions. It's also the first time that it's on purpose. So Foreign Minister Yair Lapid was the one who combined anti-Semitism and delegitimization, because Israel is the only country in the world in which its existence is being questioned. And again, think of it, let that land for a second, of how is it that the only Jewish country in the world is being questioned on whether or not it should exist. Israel is the only country in the world that has its own Wikipedia entry, the legitimacy of the state of Israel. It's the only country, not like North Korea or like Syria or Russia, just Israel. So this disproportionate obsession that people have with Israel in the United Nations, for example. So in the last 7 years, I think, I may be getting that. The last 7 years, Iran had 7 UN Security Council resolution against it, and Israel 123. So that the disproportionate obsession that people have with Israel, and I'm not saying Israel's perfect, right? No country is perfect.
No country
but
is
we
right.
look at, as I think Jonah and you talked about this as well, right? The policies that we dislike about America, right? And all the terrible stuff that America had done throughout the years. Nobody's talking about dismantling America.
Right.
Nobody's talking. Every country had and has terrible policies that we all don't like. Nobody likes kids in cages in the borders, but we're not saying let's dismantle America for this.
Right.
Yet it is said about Israel.
Yeah.
Without care, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Globalize the Intifada. Intifada was a popular uprising in which Palestinians exploded themselves in buses on the streets of Tel Aviv near my house, where I woke up, and the bus that I would take had like 22 people killed in one explosion. That's the Intifada that now social justice warriors are calling to globalize. How is this a progressive movement?
I saw
it's
a
quite
video.
Frustrating. I'm clearly quite frustrated about it.
Well, I think your frustration is absolutely warranted. And it's difficult to feel like you know the truth, the history, and you're willing to have these conversations, but so many people hear one version of it, and then that's just what they run with, right?
Totally.
And it is a very nuanced and complicated situation. And if people really care, I think that they would take the time to talk and learn and figure everything out. And I recently saw this video of an Israel activist. I think his name was Rudy Rochman or Rockman. Yeah. And he gives such a beautiful explanation of the entire conflict. And at the end, he said, you can be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine simultaneously. And so, I just wanted to get your ideas and your response to that, because it was such a beautiful sentiment how he spelled it out. And I'm like, I was sharing it with so many people, like, please watch this, please watch this. Now, of course, you can lead the horse to the water. You can't make them drink it, right? So I don't know if they did, but I just wanted to hear your response to that.
I love this. I say this in my book all the time, pretty much from chapter 1. So to try and create this as a either or, as you're either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, is again nefarious voices that are trying to dismantle Israel. This is not the case for literally no Israeli that I know or that exists, right? I'm sure there's like a handful of Israelis, just like a handful of people that hate blacks and Jews and and Arabs and whatever.
Right. They're going to be everywhere.
The fringes of whatever, the crazies.
Yeah.
But that just is not true. So the interesting question so obviously I'm pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian, 100% on both, right? The question to why there hasn't been a Palestinian state yet, it's too long of an answer to give right now, but cannot and should not be laid at the hands of Israel only, because it's not factually and historically true. Because there have been many opportunities throughout the years in which the Jews, before the creation of Israel, were talking about creating a state and sovereignty for the local Arabs. The United Nations and the Partition Plan in 1947, Partition Plan Resolution 181, gave the Arabs a state, and they said no. Throughout the years, there have been many offers for an Arab-Palestinian state, and they kept saying no. I know it's hard to hear, but that's the truth. So where is the responsibility? Again, too long of an answer right now, but look into it and be careful in your conclusion that is automatically anti-Israel. So obviously, the majority of Israelis are pro-Israelis and pro-Palestinians. We just hate Hamas. We just don't like the terrorist organizations that are promoting Sharia law, which is non-conducive for human development. Like, Sharia law needs to be something that every progressive fights against, because it's an embodiment and a state-sponsored rape culture. And I mean, it's a horrific culture. Right. Sharia law is what's causing the women of Afghanistan right now to be covered again. The Taliban just had the women covered again, fully from head to toe. But we're not hearing Bella Hadid saying anything about that. Right. That's oppression of Arabs by Arabs. Why are you not yelling about that? No, because it's always against Israel. That is the culture that we're fighting against. We're not fighting against the Palestinians. We're fighting against a culture that is specific, right? Not the entire Palestinian population, but Hamas is a terrorist genocidal organization that wants to kill all the Jews and oppress all the women and kill all the gays. That's just what they want. It's not hidden. So yes, I am pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian. Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. So when you take away, people following celebrities and that's all they're listening to, what resources do you think people should really, put their attention towards so that they are getting the right information and armed with the right facts?
First of all, stay out of social media. So I'm not kidding. It's in May, when the conflict with the war with Hamas happened, it was heartbreaking to see what's going on. So there were all these memes and these cartoons of, is Israel a state or is it a colonialist endeavor, right? All these, and by the way, let me debunk the colonialist state as well. Israel is not a colonialist state. It's literally a refugee state that was decolonized from Great Britain. Like, literally. Yeah. But to call it a colonialist, it's like, again, what are you talking about? Right? So first of all, stay off of social media. Unless there are a couple of accounts that are actually good. There's an account called A Wider Frame which is great. That gives all the information of what's happening and truthfully and in time. There's an account called stopantisemitism.org, which is also great. I listen to Left, Right, and Center. So I'll read the New York Times and I'll watch Fox News, right? And NPR. And like I actually tape a bunch of the extreme Fox News shows in order to know what's happening, to get the other side perspective as well. And I have the privilege of being able to read Hebrew. So I read a lot of Israeli news to know what's actually happening behind, you know. So when they talk about the riots in Al-Aqsa, these riots started because radical Palestinians have barricaded themselves inside the mosques and started throwing rocks and firecrackers and prevented Palestinians from actually going in and exercising their religious freedom. But then the Israeli police had to intervene because there were riots and firecrackers and everything. And then Bella Hadid only shows the Israeli police like intervening. And you're like, oh my God.
It's like, that's when you need context. Yeah.
By the way, I'm not here to say that Israel's a perfect country. I don't want it to come across that way. Every country has policies that are not great.
For sure.
Just watch your perception about vilifying that one state, demonizing that one state, thinking that that one state is the worst in the world. Isn't. And that's your subconscious bias.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so grateful that you took the time to chat with me and to share with my listeners. I appreciate your voice and all that you're doing. Can you let everyone know, one, where they can get your book, but also where they can follow you, because you do some really great posts that I think people need to hear. So
first of all, again, thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you, we feel so under attack that every time somebody reaches out, we're like, thank you so much. So thank you. Follow me at Noa Tishby, NoaTishby, on all social medias. My preferred one is Instagram. And you can get my book anywhere you buy books, Amazon. So put in Israel and it comes out.
Wonderful.
Israel, simple guide.
Thank you so much, Noa.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really do. Thank you, Linda.